Taking a look at the SERVPRO First Responder Bowl, Louisiana playing UTSA. Louisiana comes into this matchup that's going to be played on December 26th on Saturday as a 13.5 point favorite with a total of 59.5. That was an early total. You look at the Raging Cajuns, 9-1 out of the Sun Belt, co-champions with Coastal Carolina. Of course, that Sun Belt Conference championship game wasn't played. UTSA finished second in CUSA West. And really, when you look at them at 7-4 and look at their schedule, three consecutive losses in the middle of their season: UAB, BYU, and Army. No shame in those losses. As a matter of fact, Army was their worst loss. They lost to UAB by 8. Actually, they lost to Army by 12 and BYU by 7. So really close games there. They did lose a game to Florida Atlantic at Florida Atlantic, 24-3. So 3 road games they dropped, if road games mean anything in 2020, given the fact that there's really no crowds there anyway. But 4 losses, and I don't really think they're bad losses. We know that Florida Atlantic, the strength of their team is their defense. So they obviously held serve there against UTSA. But UTSA beat the teams that they were supposed to beat. So that tells me something. That tells me that they show up when they come to play and they beat the teams that they're supposed to. Now, whether or not they're supposed to beat the Raging Cajuns is another thing. The Raging Cajuns open up a 13.5 point favorite. So, the odds are with Louisiana in this matchup. And so when we look at the teams and you look at the numbers within the numbers, obviously Louisiana averaging over 33 points a game. They're giving up 21 a game. UTSA scoring 28 a game, and they're giving up 25. Both offenses are balanced. You look at UTSA, they're averaging over 214 rushing a game, almost 200 passing a game. They come in at 199. And then over on the other side, Louisiana averaging over 200 yards, both rushing and passing. And then defensively, UTSA giving up 25 points. They're giving up about 150 on the ground, 228 through the air. Louisiana giving up less than 200 both on the ground and the air, 180 on the ground, 166 through the air, 21 points altogether per game. But when you look at the rushing defense and the rushing statistics, they favor right now UTSA, in my opinion, in that running game, especially as long as we get Sincere McCormick playing. He's a game changer on the UTSA side. The Louisiana defense is not airtight when it comes to their rushing defense. They are giving up 180 on the ground. And so if UTSA can get close to that 214 number that they're averaging per game, this could be a good game, particularly for Sincere McCormick from a fantasy standpoint. He'd be the one guy I'd really be targeting in this matchup. He's my top play in this matchup. But let's look at some of the players on both sides of the ball. When we look at the offense on the Louisiana side, well-rounded. However, there are more questions in the passing game than there are in the running game. We know we've got Elijah Mitchell. We've got Trey Regis. Both of those guys gone over 600 yards. Both of them have scored at least 7 touchdowns this season. I look to see there's going to be a mix in there. Whether or not who gets more carries could depend on who has the hot hand in this matchup. And I don't even think you can disregard someone like Chris Smith, their third running back, and as long as he's healthy in this matchup as well. He's gotten almost 60 touches this year. He's got over 450 yards total offense and scored a couple of touchdowns, so he can make plays for them out of the backfield as well. The question for Louisiana is not so much with Levi Lewis, who's thrown 17 touchdown passes this year and has run for another 5. So he's totaled over 20 touchdowns this year. It's where's the consistency going to come from in the passing game? When you look at the receivers, Peter LeBlanc, Kyron Lacey, their 2 top receivers, Jalen Williams as well. The Louisiana receiving corps has been kind of hit with injuries here. There are guys missing some time, in and out rotation. The leading receivers, Lacey has 24, LeBlanc 23. So there really isn't a true number one receiver in that offense. But let's be honest, the one thing that Levi Lewis has really been able to do with that passing game is he's been able to really make it complement their running game. So he's been able to do it with a mixed bag at receiver because that running game for Louisiana is so good with Elijah Mitchell, with Trey Regis, Chris Smith, even Levi Lewis himself has 300 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns. So the rushing game for Louisiana is really what fuels the passing game as well. And so I expect more of that in this matchup against UTSA. Now, let's look on the UTSA side of the ball. Frank Harris is going to go in at quarterback. He's got 18 total touchdowns this year. You've got Sincere McCormick. We know what we're getting with him at running back. The guy's got over 1,300 rushing yards this year, 11 touchdowns. He's even added 18 receptions in the passing game as well. So, in my opinion, just like I said a little earlier, he is the player to have in this matchup from a fantasy standpoint. When you look at the UTSA receivers, you're going to get a little bit more of proven commodities. You're going to get better playmakers on the UTSA side than you are on the Louisiana side. You've got Zachary Franklin, 44 receptions, 579 yards, 6 touchdowns. Joshua Cephas, 55 receptions, 521 and 4, and then Brennan Dingle, 27, 266 and 2. When you look at those 3 guys, that's going to be their 3 top targets in this game, as long as all 3 of those guys play. In my opinion, I give a little bit. I think the running back is a little bit of a wash. I give the advantage to Louisiana just because they can run out more depth at the running back position. But if I were to single one player from the fantasy standpoint, it's obviously going to be Sincere McCormick because there's no committee approach on that side of the ball. When you look at the receivers, the advantage goes to UTSA. However, the advantage in quarterback play, in my opinion, obviously goes to Levi Lewis. So there's a lot of things in this matchup that I think both teams will have an opportunity to make plays. I think there'll be opportunities for both teams to move the ball. And I think there's going to be some points scored in this one. What's interesting to me is that total at 59.5. When you look at the schedule, you look at the Raging Cajuns, they won at Iowa State. They won at Georgia State. They've beaten everybody except Coastal Carolina on their schedule. UAB, the Conference USA champion, they beat 24-20 as well. But when you look at games like Texas State, 44-34, Arkansas State, 27-20. They did beat South Alabama by 28 and UL Monroe by 50 at the end of the year before beating Appalachian State on the road. My concern for the Raging Cajuns when looking at them and looking at the schedule and the teams that they play and the games that they won and even the one that they lost, it seems like they've kind of played to the level of their competition in most of these contests. I mean, they won a game against Georgia State that they snuck out late. I mean, they could have just as easily have lost that game. I know there was another game as well where they pulled it out late as well. So my concern with Louisiana is, are they going to play to the level of their competition? And then on the other side of the ball, UTSA has really done just that. They've beaten the teams that they were supposed to beat, and yet they've lost to UAB by 8. They lost to BYU by 7. They lost to Army by 12. They did lose to Florida Atlantic by 21. I'm going to throw that out as the anomaly in this equation and say UTSA, as long as they show up, they're going to bring their game. I like the Raging Cajuns to win this game, but I'm going to go ahead and pick UTSA to cover that 13.5 number. I think the total is going to be close. If I lean one way or the other, I'd probably go with a closer game, and I think a closer game might actually favor the under. So I'm going to go under the total of 59.5 in this. But for me, it's the Raging Cajuns and take UTSA and the points.